Please welcome our next friend and panelist up to executive interview up to the stage, Jim Rinaldi. Jim, come on up. Great to see you.
Good seeing you.
Yeah. Can everyone hear Jim?
If I talk now?
Yeah? Good.
Okay.
Good. So Jim, tell us a little bit about your career. I think you've had an amazing career and some of the successful steps that you took to arrive at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory.
Well, first of all, the photo you're looking at is from my Marriott days, so you do change over time. I spent almost 16 years at Marriott. I learned what customer meant. I was an IT techie early on. I got into management early on, but I didn't understand customer service. I didn't understand what the customer was. Marriott taught me the value of that. And so I took that with me. I left Marriott, went to IRS, don't boo me, but I helped do the Free Tax Alliance. It allows you to file your taxes online. I stayed 14 months, 4 days, and 1 hour there. I left and went to Food Drug Administration, the CIO. Amazing, you can sort of see the impact now, but the amazing organization, one of the best times I've had. Really enjoyed that organization, enjoyed the people. But JPL came calling. And in 2005, there was a mission called Stardust over the July 4th weekend. And I was mulling over the offer, and that mission happened, and it was successful. And I had to take the job and move to California from the DC area. I really didn't want to move to California. And so the experiences I had, though, each area, each leader I've worked for has taught me something. And this is how I've been able to do what I do. I've been 14 years as CIO at JPL. And 2 years ago, I decided that was enough. And luckily, the lab said, could you do some more things? And so I was able to work out something with the lab and continue to do some of the things I'm passionate about as an individual.
Oh, great story. Were you working in the business at Marriott or in IT?
I was in IT. I've been in IT my whole career.
So Carl Wilson?
Oh, yes, I knew Carl.
He's a legend, right?
He's a legend, no doubt about it. The guys before him were amazing. I was pre-Carl even.
Okay.
So you get to know and get inspired by leadership and what they can inspire you, or some. I worked for some people, not at Marriott, IRS, that were not inspiring. And you sort of know when it's not inspiring and when it is inspiring, and you take away those qualities. You try to emulate quality. By the way, I started as a management when I was 20 years old. I was a supervisor at 20 years old. I had no clue what I was doing. But you watch others and you learn from others and you look at who inspires you. Eventually you get to the point where, do I want to work for someone like me? And if you can't answer that question, you may be in the wrong job. So I wanted to manage the way I want, I wanted to be the person that they worked for, someone worked for that I would work for.
Well, you sound to me also to be a very positive person.
Overall, yeah. I struggle sometimes with stupidity, which is probably why I work at JPL, because you don't find stupid people there. And so I really enjoy being around smart people.
It's interesting. I think we touched on the last panel, Barb's panel there. Keeping a positive mindset when the world's falling apart is important. How do you do it?
So, I look for opportunity. During the pandemic, first of all, let me tell you, it was a challenge stepping out of the CIO role. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to be a non-CIO. And so it was a personal struggle for me to learn how to be something else and not be the leader, but be a contributor, an individual contributor. First of all, I didn't know how to work my calendar. That's kind of embarrassing. And then I end up now with 4 calendars because I do work for some others as well. And I'm not good at that still. But you learn over time what drives you, what motivates you. And I have to say, 2 years later, I'm in a good place.
Great stuff. And what's the new area that you're passionate about at JPL that you're working on?
So I've been allowed to do something called Future IT. I deemed it Future IT. And it's not original. I took it from somebody else. But the idea behind it is to look 5 years and beyond. We know with what's maturing now, we know what the technologies that are the next 5 years, everybody can say AI, ML, everybody can say all those things. Those things will be maturing quite a bit, and they're already starting to mature, and they're becoming part of our fabric of the technologies that people want to implement to get the insights they're looking for. And so I'm looking at technology beyond that. Now, hopefully, 5 years, digital transformation will be over. Everything's digital, and you know that's not going to be their way. But the fact is, you hope when you think about getting past digital transformation, all of a sudden, what becomes the next thing? What becomes enabled? Well, if you're looking at 5G today, and some of your phones say 5G, some say 5GE, some of them, the next thing is 6G. Okay, when it's 6G, and when you have pervasive wireless, whether it's in satellites or whatever around the globe, which seems like it's going to happen, now you've got another 4 billion people enabled. How's that going to work? What's that going to affect? How are you going to buy? How are you going to sell? How are you going to get your workforce? It really is fun to think about, and think about what that means for not only the company I work for, but other companies as well.
What other technologies are coming up with in your 5-year view?
I really think the impact of quantum computing is going to become more real. I think we're seeing a lot of investment in quantum computing. We see there's a lot of expertise, not in just the quantum mechanics piece of it. I'm not a quantum engineer or a quantum mechanics person, but I do work for Caltech, I'll tell you that part. But I do look at what the influences are, what the investments are, and some of the technologies that people are experimenting with. It's not just the computing side of it, it's storage, it's networking, it's cybersecurity, and especially in the area of encryption. And I think it's going to have a much more positive influence on computing given the next 5 to 10 years.
Does everyone know what JPL does? Your mission, maybe vision?
That's usually the big draw. That's why people really want to hear me. JPL is the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. We're part of NASA. We're NASA's only federally funded research and development center. It's managed by Caltech, hence I'm a Caltech employee. And what we do, if you follow the stuff we put on Mars, one thing that inspired me is we launched the Perseverance rover that's up there now during the pandemic, and we landed it on Mars perfectly during the pandemic. We also had a helicopter. You may be aware of. Anybody know what I'm talking about? Raise your hands if you know what I'm talking about. We have a helicopter we embedded into the spacecraft that I got to see in demonstration in a vacuum chamber, and it was amazing then. And now to see it flying, physically flying on Mars, was inspiring, and it was a feat of engineering that had not been done before. And so that workforce is what inspired me to be a better CIO.
How long did it take to get to Mars?
Well, roughly it depends on the timing of the year. We try to go where it's the closest, because it's not a perfect circle, it's an oval. And so it took from August to February. Interesting.
What are we learning from Mars?
Well, we know there's a chance of life that exists on Earth, on Mars. We're not sure exactly what form that was, but we know there's traces of water and what that could mean. If you have traces of water, there's a potential for life. And so our instruments, we've sent up Curiosity rover in 2012. You may remember that one. It's roving. It's still working, by the way. It's roving around the other part of Mars, whereas Perseverance is now in a different part, but has 7 different instruments. One thing it's doing is it's taking core samples, and those core samples it's going to deposit in an area, which is then a cool mission called Mars Sample Return, which looks targeted for 2028. We'll go to Mars, have a unit to go and pick up those samples, has a rocket then to take it off Mars and bring it back to Earth.
Cool stuff. Amazing. Really amazing stuff.
By the way, the IT has to support that, and there's no pressure.
So what is NASA doing now? What are the latest projects beyond this?
Well, NASA itself wants to send humans back to space. Our new moon has been kind of the space station for the past plus decade, and so you lose some of the imagination. Even though there's great experiments up there on the space station, JPL has one called Cold Atom Lab, but we really need to see astronauts go back to space, and people like that. People want that. It inspires people, and it creates new industries and technologies. And so we're going to go to the moon, and then from the moon, we're going to hopefully build a gateway that allows us to launch from there to Mars, and hopefully bring humans to Mars. Now, JPL does a robotic part of this, so JPL is very good in robotics, and so we think robotic technology is going to have to support the humans whatever planet they go to or what other missions we have. It certainly will do that, but support humans when we do land on Mars.
How exciting. What are some of the biggest learnings that we've learned from all of the space exploration over the years?
Now I've got to be careful how I say this. There is life, Earth-like planets out there. And that just creates the imagination to just wonder, and is there life like us out there in other planets? Should we be concerned about our own planet? We are. We take measurements so it can be fact-based discussion. And should we need alternatives one day? I won't need it, but maybe others will. And so I think that's a reasonable question to ask.
How did you end up at JPL?
So that's a really good one. That's a recruiter called me and posed it to me, and he said it in California, and I said no. I told my wife, and she said yes. And so she wanted to come to California, and so I came on the interview process. It was an 8-month interview process. It kind of went on and on and on, and multiple trips. The first time I came out to LA for an interview, I was driving. They gave me a rental car. I was driving from the airport to Pasadena, and 19 police cars passed me. And I thought, oh crap, I'm going into something bad. And luckily, it was just the car chase of the night in LA. LA does that for fun. We have car chases, and we stop all news, and we watch it, and it usually ends bad.
Oh, geez. Any questions for Jim? One in the back of the room there. Thanks.
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about how NASA is collaborating with all these over-capitalized billionaires that are, trying to outdo each other in this space race, but just curious how that's working.
Well, that's a really interesting question, the way you phrased it. It's probably not bad to be a billionaire, so I don't think you're meaning that. But an overcapitalization, from my point of view, you can never be overcapitalized, under maybe. But we rely on SpaceX, for example, to provide us a rocket that we can fly over and over, that we can take our spacecraft from Vandenberg up to low Earth orbit or Earth orbit. So that saves us money, quite frankly. And so that's a good thing. The fact that private industry can help get humans into space generates an interest, and it gets people inspired, and that inspires the next set of astronauts. And it could be that one of these other companies gets to Mars with the support of NASA. So it could happen that way. And so, I don't mean to be a historian here, but, the railroads kind of started that way, when you think about it.
Interesting.
Question for you. If they called you and said they had an extra seat for the next ride, would you go?
No. And let me say this again, hell no. That's not something I look forward to. But I have to tell you, I've got to meet and talk to many astronauts, and every one of them would go back up. Many of them, I'm not sure all of them, would go if it's a one-way trip.
What?
They would go if it's a one-way trip.
Really?
Yeah.
What's the logic behind that?
It's the adventure. It's the thrill. It's the thing that drives them.
So let me get this right. They know they're not coming back?
Right. They would be willing to do. There are astronauts who are willing to do that. Like to Mars. Yeah.
Interesting. Over the years, spending's been up and down with NASA, and I think in the past 10 or 20 years, it's been kind of down, hasn't it?
It goes up and down. Sometimes it gets politicized a little bit, whether you do earth science heavy one year, you do human another. We've been very fortunate at JPL that NASA's really treated us really, really well and has funded the key missions that we're happy to do. So whether it's in the earth science, partnerships with India, partnerships with CNES, the French government, partnerships with JAXA. We provide a way of working with countries and taking the best out of them to get the technology we need. By the way, private companies, just about half our budget goes to contracting out some of the things that we do and need to do what we do. For example, scientists generate the ideas. They take them from what's called decadal studies, and they then determine what data they need. We typically can't buy the technology off the shelf, for another planet. So we have to go and invent the technology to go get the data. And so that workforce at JPL and the partners we work with have that ability to do that. We benefit on the planet, we benefit because some of those technologies like GPS and others like that, we end up becoming consumable products over time. And I will give you one example during the pandemic, if that's okay. During COVID's height, we had a bunch of engineers at JPL who got together and got approved through our approval chain, and were able to create a respirator that's built for, high pressure respirator that's built for COVID so that patients could have a better experience, recovery, whatever. And the fact that we made it open source so that people can, or license it, people can license it from us and build the respirator in the market. So we also created and this was the IT organization that led the function of creating 3D printed masks that were the N95 kind. We did open source that, and people could, companies or individuals could take that and create their own masks that were N95 capable.
So you've really probably followed your passion and your interests over the years?
I think so. When you work with the workforce at JPL, you get inspired. Sometimes you get disappointed. There are some things that don't always work right. But you get inspired most of the time. If some of you may have been to a launch at Kennedy, or maybe you've seen the launches out of Vandenberg. I've been to both. And when you see a launch, when you feel a launch, that's an amazing experience. There's no ride at Disney World like that. And you would get to experience that, to see that. Here's what's funny. I'll tell you, we did a launch of, I forgot which mission it was, at Vandenberg a couple of years ago. We're all in the control room. I'm not allowed to touch buttons, but I could hear. And all of a sudden, it's starting. We all run outside so we can watch it. So it's not looking at the panels. We're going outside to watch it. And it's awesome when you're able to do that and you see something that big go up.
Jim, thanks so much for coming in today and being part of this. This is great. Loved it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.